Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co-host Nick Olson. How are we doing today, Nick?
I'm good. The Twins ended a 22-year playoff series drought tonight, so that's pretty exciting. Matt, I know you're not actually a Twins fan.
Yeah,
Can I out
I
you for a
I
listener?
actually have a
As a
very
Philadelphia sports fan, gross.
I have a very relevant tweet here that I put out. I would rather see the Twins, the Wild, and the Timberwolves just completely disbanded or moved away from Minnesota if I could guarantee a Vikings Super Bowl victory than any other outcome. Frankly,
For
that's what I
shame.
get for not growing up in Minnesota, I suppose. So sorry to everybody who hates me now, but it just kind of is how it
At the
is.
very least, you're not an Eagles fan, which is the most egregious of all Philly sports. So we'll give
Yeah,
you that at least.
yeah, absolutely.
Although for
Like,
you, you probably would have had a much happier life had you been rooting for the Eagles with their Super Bowl win. So.
yeah, I might have climbed up a few more light poles and stuff too in my lifetime. So we'll see. No. Um, but this is not a Philadelphia Eagles podcast. This is not a basketball podcast or a baseball podcast or a hockey podcast. This is a Minnesota Vikings podcast. So we have just a lot to dive into. You know, as we always do during the season, it seems, right? It's like we get together every week and we can go probably 2 hours if we really wanted to on all the topics that we want to talk about. But we want to get this to you here today. The Vikings obviously played the Carolina Panthers this past weekend. They won their first game of the season, which is great because being 0-3 really sucked. And I think we would have all felt a lot worse on Monday if we woke up and saw that the number one overall pick of the draft was belonged to the Minnesota Vikings rather than the number one and number two overall pick in the draft belonging to the Chicago Bears, right? Like, I think that feels pretty good, even if it does mean the Bears are in line for a pretty good player there. Uh, so nice to get the win. Obviously, still technically a one score game, so Kevin O'Connell is not off of his one score game streak, at least in terms of wins, I think. Is it the only win in the Kevin O'Connell era? I guess no. Two non one score games bookended last season, right? The Packers win in week 1 and then the Bears win in week 18, I think, are the only non one score game wins that the Vikings have under head coach Kevin O'Connell. Obviously, sloppy in a lot of ways on offense, very impressive on defense. We only allowed 6 points. Um, total on defense, 13 points total, obviously, with the pick six in there. So why don't we start on the defensive side of the ball, Nick? Marcus Davenport obviously got his the most snaps he's played in the game, right? He played 6 against the Eagles. I don't really count that as playing, but you can't caveat it saying his first Vikings action, right? It's his first real Vikings action, let's call it, in this game. And I was quite impressed with what he did personally. What did you see from him?
Yeah, I saw a lot of good stuff. I mean, obviously the pass rushing jumps out at you. He had a sack in the game and cleaned or was like contributing pressure on another sack. So that's obviously like a grand debut for him. I was impressed by the variety of ways in which he was able to move and the fluidity with which he was able to combo his pass rush moves. I mean, he had two really, really fluid spin moves that he won, and he won on the inside as well. He was lining up over guards, kind of like I wouldn't call it the Zadarius Smith role, but that ability to roam throughout the line, especially on pass rushing downs, I think is great, and it allows us to use him against sort of deploy him against the weak link. And I think for the Panthers, that was their left guard. He's been struggling this year, but he won with spin moves. He had a really good arm over, very fluid, won very quickly. He was great on stunts. He got home on a couple stunts or at least pressure. He had some really good bull rushes where he just like drove the left tackle into Bryce Young. So it was able to win a lot of different ways, get a lot of pressure. And I also thought he did a great job in the run game. I mean, he was
Yeah.
displacing blockers, he was moving guys back, he was not just like stalemating and like I'll take a stalemate in my run fit every day because it means that gap is clogged. But he was pushing guys back too, so that was really encouraging to see. Obviously, they've been missing him the first 3 games, but him coming back, I think, is a real difference maker. Because this whole Flores scheme is like, I wanna be able to get pressure on the quarterback. When you have a player as good as Daniil Hunter, that's great. But teams can always double team Hunter and find ways to take him out. When you've got two good pass rushers, then it becomes a real big problem opposing offenses. So was a really valuable addition, I think, to this defense, and really gives them the potential to take this defense up a bit of a notch just by virtue of the fact of having two very good pass rushers who are also good run defenders too. So that was great to see.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I was really impressed with Davenport, especially coming off of, an ankle injury, which you would think if any of the effects of that are still lingering, he might be a little bit less quick or maybe not have some of the explosiveness, but it really seemed like it was in full force with the quickness and the explosiveness. That spin move was really impressive. There was a really impressive run defense play where it was outside zone and he cut inside of the tackle, right? The it was Ike Ekwonu who was trying to reach block him, and he backdoors it, right? Which, as an offensive lineman, typically in the outside zone plays, you want to let that guy run through that because you expect your back to be able to get outside of that player. Like, Davenport was quick enough that I think it was Chuba Hubbard was carrying the ball. He wasn't able to get outside of him, so he had to cut it back, and he cut it back right into, I think it was Patrick Jones, who got a tackle for a loss. Harrison Smith was also there unblocked and kind of in on the tackle as well. So that quickness, from the edge was really impressive. There was another goal-to-go play where I think Marcus Davenport got his recorded tackle for a loss, where he just completely crashed the tight end into the line of scrimmage, right? The tight end's trying to kick him out and create a lane for the running back, and Davenport's strength against, I think it was Tommy Tremble, who was the tight end in that scenario, just completely knocked him into the tight end next to him, right, who was also trying to block. They had two tight ends on the same side. So that really showed up in the run game, and that's on the edge, right? That's a hard setting edge. It's a very physical presence, and I love that from Davenport. I think that adds something that maybe a DJ Wanham doesn't have kind of in his arsenal as much on that edge. And then we get to the pass rushing downs, and he's pass rushing on the interior. And I think this is honestly kind of what we should have expected from Marcus Davenport. Like, I don't think it should be a surprise that we're using him on the interior in pass rush downs for the most part, or, in blitz packages where we end up with multiple guys on the line of scrimmage. And we're using him on the outside more in base downs as kind of a run defender. But I really like that usage of him because the Vikings have been absolutely horrible rushing the passer from the interior with their interior players, right? Like, there were a couple plays in the Chargers game I remember where we got Danielle Hunter lined up over the center or something like that, and obviously that was very effective, because he's very effective. But like Dean Lowry and Jonathan Bullard and Kairos Tonga and all of those interior rushers outside of Harrison Phillips had only combined for like 2 total pressures over like 100 pass rushing snaps prior to this game, right? So having Davenport reduced down inside, somebody who as a defensive line body, as opposed to, asking Ivan Pace to line up over a guard or something and win one-on-one against that guard, is going to be very critical for the Vikings getting pass rush and supplements Danielle Hunter on the outside, right? When you only have one pass rusher, to your point earlier, you're not going to be nearly as effective. So I was very impressed with Davenport. There was also a screenplay I want to shout out where he read the lineman's block in front of him and basically backed off and found the window based on, the lineman kind of moving in that direction. So I thought that was good mental awareness, and he seems to be very locked in to me. Starting off his season, which is great because he's somebody we're going to need moving forward, and I think he really helped kind of unlock the defense. So why don't we talk a little bit about the defense as a whole, right? I mean, we've kind of had an up and down season, I would say, in terms of the public perception of the defense. I'm not sure really the defense has changed all that much over the first 4 weeks personally, right? But like, people were very disappointed after week 1 because, we let Baker Mayfield run out the clock in the second half on us, right? Basically 2 drives took up almost the entire time in the second half. They were upset at the run defense after week 2 because the Eagles absolutely ran all over us, right? And I think there's good reason to be upset. They were upset at the defense in general last week because we kept blitzing, Justin Herbert, and it seemed like nobody was ever able to get home. And it's like, why are we doing all these blitzes if we can't impact the quarterback at all? This is a very simplified version of it, but that seems to me what the public perception has been, right? And now week 4 we have this big explosion. Do you think there's anything we're doing significantly different on defense, Nick, or do you think it's kind of the same thing? It's just, different flavors of opponent kind of lead to different results?
That's a good question. I haven't specifically charted out like what There are different things that Flores is focusing on different games. He hasn't like rewritten the playbook or anything, but
Yeah.
like with the Eagles, I think he was selling out against the pass, and so he was giving up over 5 yards a carry. We haven't seen him give up 5 yards a carry. In fact, he's given up like 2 yards per carry in the 2 games since. So
Yeah.
I think he focuses on different things. I think he mixes up his personnel package. We saw actually a lot of interior defensive linemen in this game. Jacqueline Roy got a lot of snaps. Dean Lowry got a lot of snaps, and that's on top of Phillips playing almost every snap, and Bullard mixing in there a lot too. So he mixes things up a little bit, but I think every game he emphasizes different things, and he deploys different personnel and different sort of there are some games where he already leads the league in blitz percentage. I think he's blitzed on it's over half. I got the data. It's 56% of his snaps, which is obviously first in the NFL. He's the most blitz happy defensive coordinator. He's also for fun fact, he's also the most three-man rush heavy defensive coordinator,
Yes.
defensive play caller in the NFL. So that's fun. He's he's leads the NFL in blitzes and also three-man dropbacks, and that makes him obviously last in four-man rushes. So he mixes things up, and I think he's kind of like a pitcher, I guess, that's got a handful of different good pitches and good off-speed pitches as well, and he throws them differently to different teams. But I think he's able to use them all very well. And so I think like we're seeing like a lot of the Bengal looks, we're seeing the Bengal hawk, we're seeing the cover 0 stuff, but we're also seeing the Tampa 2, and we're seeing a lot of the cover 3 and a lot of the fire zones, and he'll deploy those in different variations with different personnel. And like with Bryce Young, he'll blitz a little bit more because I think he saw that he was not reacting well to pressure and stuff. But I think against Patrick Mahomes, who's historically very, very good against the blitz, we'll get into it, but I think he might not blitz as Mahomes quite as much as he has been blitzing some of these other quarterbacks. So I don't. This is a long-winded way of saying I don't think anything has fundamentally changed, and I think the defense is for a team that, especially in the back seven, doesn't have a lot of talent. It's 17th in EPA per play allowed. That's pretty good. If you told me going into the season that the Brian Flores defense would be 17th in EPA per play allowed, I would be like, I absolutely take that. Daniil Hunter's good. Everybody else, I'm not sure about this. But there's a lot of potential weak links on this defense, and Flores, I think, has found a way to make them an average defense, which I'll absolutely take, given how many young, new, unproven faces there are in there. So
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
100%. And one of the other things with the defense that I've been thinking about is, your point's kind of interesting because we did blitz Justin Herbert a ton, obviously. Like, that's the stat that went around. We blitzed like 86% of the time in that Chargers game, which is absurd, obviously. And Justin Herbert's not a player you typically want to blitz either, but our best plays were when we blitzed him as well on defense. Like, our most efficient defensive plays were with the heaviest blitzes that we put out against Herbert. So it was kind of an interesting dichotomy there to me. And obviously we weren't able to get home, but to me, that's somebody who's operating at an extremely high level. Now, we blitzed Bryce Young quite a bit less, but we were showing heavy pressure looks all the time. Like, I think the blitz rate in that Panthers game was only 30-something percent, but I bet we were up there at least 50+%, if not reaching the 70% range of running simulated pressures, right? Having like 6-7 guys on the line of scrimmage threatening to blitz and then dropping out of it very, very frequently and running only 3 or 4 man rushes out of that look, even if we put a lot of guys on the line of scrimmage. And I think the reason for that is, to your point, Bryce Young being a younger quarterback, right? Somebody who's maybe not as equipped to handle all of those varied looks that we were able to throw at him. And I think by the end of the game, right, especially by the second half, we've sacked him 4 times in the second half, something like that. Maybe all 5 sacks came in the second half, honestly. I don't really particularly remember. But, we were getting heavy pressure, and we kind of wore that offense down, even if it had some success in the first half. So I do think we'll see we're going to see these basic facts about Brian Flores, right? He's going to blitz a lot. He's going to put a ton of guys at the line of scrimmage. He's going to run a lot of nickel, a lot of 3 safety, a lot of 3 safeties with Metellus in there in the game, a lot of dime looks. One of the things that I found interesting so far with this defense is we've run this is from Sports Info Solutions. I don't think when I looked at it yesterday it was fully updated, but we've run like the 10th most zone coverage and the 20 something most man coverage. Where we came in expecting Flores to be a very man heavy team, he hasn't done that nearly as much with us. And I don't know if that's part of an evolution of his scheme or just a lack of trust in our corners. I could see it being either way. I have a feeling that it's a lack of trust in our corners, right? Because it's not like Belichick really has stopped running a ton of man coverage in his scheme in New England, right? Like he was still doing that last year at least. I haven't checked up on the numbers this year. But it's interesting to see that shift from Flores, but that's really the only thing I think he's done that we haven't expected so far. So that's kind of nice to see. Another big shout out, and this is very much to Brian Flores' credit, right? Harrison Smith gets 3 sacks on Sunday. We're finally using Harrison Smith as a blitzer again. It's like kind of back to the Mike Zimmer days where he's even more heavily than the Mike Zimmer days, but the bad man in Ed Donatell rate is kind of gone, where he only blitzed Harrison Smith 12 snaps or something ludicrous like that last year. What'd you see out of Harrison Smith this game? Do we want to go over the sacks? Do we want to talk about how he played in general?
I mean, just an insane game added to his Hall of Fame highlight reel. I mean, just from the box score, this was like an absolutely absurd game. He had 4 pressures, including a 3-sack game. A 3-sack game from anybody is insane. Like a 3-sack. Daniil Hunter hasn't had. Has he had a 3-sack game? I think he has before, but like
he had one against the Eagles earlier this year.
Yeah,
but still.
Yeah, okay. But like 3 sacks is a heck of a lot, especially for a defensive lineman, including the game-winning sack, which he lined up against a left tackle and beat the left tackle with like a pass rush. That's like unheard of for a safety to be doing that. It's insane. You add on top of that, he had 9 stops in this game because they were doing so many like screens and quick runs, and he was in on so many run stops. He had 2 tackles for a loss among those 9 pass stops and run stops, tackles where it's like only a few yards in front of the line of scrimmage or something, and short of the first down. He had the forced fumble, obviously, on the DJ Wanham fumble recovery touchdown. He was targeted 6 times. He allowed 0 first downs and 9 total yards on 6 targets. So that just from a not even talking about what he was doing on film, like that's an absolutely insane performance from Harrison Smith. And it's really fun seeing him back on the line of scrimmage, threatening things, disguising things. He's so good at like knowing when to time his jump on the pass rush and being able to disguise it and being like, will he drop? Won't he? Is he coming? Is he dropping back? So that's really fun to see. He's really good at tackling. He had some really nice tackles, like ankle tackles or just dragging guys down. Was good against the screen. Was good against the run. Fit the run really well. This Flores defense drops so much in zone, it's one thing that if I can criticize it, I feel like and I've made this criticism before on this podcast, but they open up holes for quarterbacks who can find where the soft spots are. Yep. And I think you saw basically, I mean, I think the Vikings turned in a good performance against Bryce Young in this game, but basically every single successful play the Panthers ran was a post route in the soft spot of the zone, past the corner, but before the safety, stopping short of the safety or whatever. Or it was, if it not a post, then a dig route or sit route in the middle of the field, something that looked kind of like that. And there was one corner route maybe, but like there was like 9 Adam Thielen quick glance routes, post routes for big gains and stuff. But Harrison Smith, to his credit, was not involved on that. He was doing just a very good job, and I like that Flores knows how to deploy Harrison Smith. I mean, Donatella, Harrison Smith is good at a lot of things. You can deploy him in a lot of places, but he's going to do more damage closer to the line of scrimmage. So it was obviously exciting to see him being very successful and being very effective on those pass rush snaps, coming in the clutch, and also being very effective shutting down the run as well. So just an all-around really incredible performance from a guy who's had a lot of really, really incredible performances in his career.
Yeah, I will say, 2 of the sacks obviously unblocked, but that's a credit to Brian Flores. Like, when Harrison Smith was getting sacks under Zimmer, it's not like he was blocked on the majority of sacks, right? It's like we're running simulated pressures. In that case, it was the double A gap mug with, the defensive back, which was typically Smith, all the way on the edge, right, who's coming completely unblocked and just absolutely wallops the quarterback. That's almost exactly what happened on the strip sack. I think Chuba Hubbard messed up his assignment because they full slided that protection, and then the running back went the same way as the full slide, which makes no sense from an offensive perspective. I will say that sack at the end of the game, it is a little bit harder play for the tackle than we're making it because he has a dual read on that. He has to respect Danielle Hunter because he had two players outside of him. So if you watch it, he's looking for Hunter first. That makes him late to get into his kick step, and that's Ike Ekwonu. And Harrison Smith, to his credit, wins the edge, right? He has the quickness to win the edge, and that's what you're hoping for when you kind of get a safety in that scenario, that he's going to be fast enough. And he kind of has that flying leap that he does to bring Bryce Young down. It's pretty cool.
The Neil Hunter leap, the
yes.
full takeoff. Legs curled backwards, jumping forward, arms in the air like Superman. That's good stuff.
By the way, statistically, Danielle Hunter wasn't incredible in this game, but I thought there were at least 5 snaps where it's oh, that dude rules. Another player I want to shout out is Cam Bynum, who I think is having a great year so far. It's just such a night and day difference for him in the past 2 schemes, right? Donatello, he seemed like he was late to everything. He seemed like he's hesitant. Here, he's driving on balls. He's really just doing a great job in general, I think, coming forward and making the plays that he needs to as a safety. I think he's one of the top players in the NFL in tackles. So that's really impressive from him. Anybody you wanted to shout out, Nick, on the Vikings defense?
Yeah, I think part of the reason Flores has been so zone heavy is I think he understands that, well, one, we've got a lot of safeties who are better playing, with their face forward, reading the quarterback, but also, Bynum, Smith, a lot of these guys, they're really good reading the quarterback, but they're also really good at planting their foot in the ground and clicking and closing down on the ball, and I think Bynum is the best exemplary of that. The best example of that, has just been very good rallying to the football. I mean, the other thing the Panthers did over and over in this game was wide receiver screens, and time again, Vikings were really rallying to make those tackles. There were one or two tackles where they missed, or there were some yards after contact, but really, the reason I think that Flores is kind of okay giving up, I mean, these screens, on the chalkboard, they're the right thing to do because every single time they have numbers. They're we've got 3 blockers and there's only 3 DBs in there, including 1 safety who's way far back. So that should be a successful screen every single time because you're able to sort of, in a way, it's like being outgapped or whatever. But Bynum and shout out Evans as well have always done a really good job driving on the ball and being able to make the play. I would say one other guy I want to shout out. He wasn't perfect, but I was impressed by Josh Metellus in this game just by the variety of things he was doing, including he was playing a lot of man coverage on a tight end. And I think that's notable, particularly as we get into this Chiefs game after they trade away Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce is kind of their number one weapon with a bullet. Will be interesting to see if Brian Flores mans up against Kelce at all, if Josh Metellus becomes the tight end eraser in this game. But he had a couple forced incompletions in the red zone that I thought were really impressive, and I thought he played well in the run fits as well. So I think obviously Davenport is the standout, and Danielle Hunter is always doing something freaky, chasing down from the backside, a screen that he snuffed out that was where the hell did you come from, man? He just chased it down in the backfield. So I mean, those guys, Harrison Smith, obviously, the stars played like stars, but I think Metellus is a guy who's you don't necessarily think of him because you don't think of the 3rd, 4th safety or whatever on the roster as a big player, but I think he's kind of like a glue player. And to that end, I would also add Harrison Phillips. I mean, Harrison Phillips is a guy that I think gets really underrated by Vikings fans because he's not generating pressure, and a lot of times in run defense he's not getting the tackle. But there's so many times he takes on double teams and he just doesn't give an inch, which is it's so hard to do that.
Yeah.
And you compare it against anybody else, and he's so effective at taking on double teams and occupying blockers, and that really sets up Hicks and Pace and Asamoah when he's out there to do a lot of damage. So I think the things he does in the run defense are very good and very easy things to underrate. So I guess I would shout him out as well as players who are contributing a lot.
Against double teams, you have 600 pounds, right, coming at you, trying to move you off your spot. It's their job to move you off your spot. and the amount of power and technique and that sort of stuff that it takes to avoid having that happen to you is really impressive. One final shout out on the defense before we flip over to the offense. I think Ivan Pace is still playing great. There are a couple plays that just show his incredible play strength, I think, for his weight, which I think his height, honestly, I could say size, but I think his height kind of plays in to helping him with leverage, right, against taller offensive linemen. So that's pretty good. But he's just also phenomenal working in traffic. Like, it's just such a revelation to have a rookie undrafted free agent, like, being a quality starting player on your defense in 4 games into his career. So it absolutely deserves another shout out.
He was like he was doing like lockpeak shed technique against an
Yeah.
offensive line, which is like,
Yeah,
dude,
and
who are you? Where did this dude come from? Like that would be a quality rep from a defensive tackle, and it's coming from an undersized linebacker.
Yeah.
So really good stuff.
and he's still a complete work in progress in coverage. Like, he's definitely not been in the best positions overall in coverage. But hey, you'll take that, especially from what we're getting for him on the defensive side of the ball. So let's flip it over to the offense. It was kind of an ugly day for the offense. They only put up 14 points on the scoreboard, right? Obviously, with the fumble that they returned for the touchdown, accounting for the other 7 of their 21 points. And it was marred by 2 red zone turnovers again, right? We just can't stop turning the ball over. I think we've had multiple turnovers in every single game so far this season. It's been really disappointing overall to see. The first one was just an awful pick six by Kirk, like way late on the throw. That throw either needs to be way earlier, or it needs to be somewhere else, or it needs to be in like the 5th row. Right, like I honestly, that play probably should have gone to the 5th row. The other one was, one where Ed Ingram got worked into Kirk, so he gets hit as he's throwing, the ball pops up into the air. Kind of an unfortunate interception, but again, it's a flip because they returned that for like 30 yards. They kicked a field goal before the half, where the Vikings had 1 minute left. They would have been able to kick a field goal on that drive, right? If they just have a normal drive before the end of the half, which we just can't seem to do as part of this offense. So, did you want to go any deeper on the turnovers than that, Nick? Or, it's just kind of the same old at this point?
Yeah, it's so funny because it's like, it's like the monkey paw. The Vikings wish, like, we're not going to turn the ball over or have any, like, we're going to, like, win the turnover. We're only going to turn the ball over 2 times. I'll take it or whatever. We're not going to fumble the ball at all.
Yeah.
The Vikings, well, there was a 1 botch snap, but other than that, like, other than 1 botch snap and 2 interceptions, 2 very costly. But, like, both interceptions were like extremely costly. Obviously, a 99-yard pick six is like basically the worst single play that can happen on a football field. I don't. It's tough though because like yes, Kirk was late, but he was like 1 hitch late, and the player made a good play. They were running. It was a 3-by-1 set. They had the guys in a bunch, the trips in a bunch, and they were running a snag concept, which is the one guy runs a little sit route underneath, and one guy runs an arrow route or flat route underneath, and that it's kind of like a natural pick, kind of like a slant flat, except instead of the slant, it's just sort of like a sit route on top. And you pair that with a corner over the top, which you don't normally throw. That's usually like an alert, especially in this situation in the red zone. But Justin Jefferson, the alert kind of draw, so you get like a horizontal stretch between the snag route and the arrow route, and a vertical stretch between the arrow route and the corner route. And the air route's the first read, and Kirk had it open on the top of his drop, and for whatever reason, he didn't pull it. There was a lot of hesitancy from Kirk in this game, which I thought is weird because he's like a veteran quarterback, and usually he's very decisive, and he's usually pretty good about timing. I would say that's one of his strengths is like he'll get rid of the ball on time. He'll be able to read the field well and get the ball out at the top of his drop when he likes what he sees. Here just hesitated, but like the one thing you can't do on that play is you can't hesitate and then throw the flat route because then you're giving the defender time to get in front of it. The whole thing is like you set up the pick and then you throw it so that while the defender's being picked, you're able to get there and get in there. That tiny little front pylon. If he had to hitch, you could have thrown it to Hawkinson on the snag route, and that would have been open. And that would have been fine for a touchdown. Instead, he does the one thing he can't do, which is he hitches and then he throws it to Osborne. It's just one hitch at the end of the day, but that's in the red zone. You got to be your timing has to be perfect, or else these things can happen. So it's the kind of mistake that like it's bad, and I don't want to give Kirk a mulligan for it. But at the same time, like one hitch, I'm not going to this isn't the worst interception Kirk has ever thrown. I think he's certainly thrown more brain farty things than this. This was just like your timing's a little bit off, and it needs to be perfect in the red zone. The other one, it's tough because like Ingram, yes, Ingram got beat bad, but also Ingram kicked a lot of ass this game. Like
Yeah,
that was the only pressure Ingram gave up all game. That was there were a couple other maybe losses, but like overall, and we can talk about the offensive line in general, but they in general kicked ass. But like yeah, that's just Kirk got hit as he threw the ball, and it was like just a hospital ball up in the air, and they were able to catch it and like very not quite a red zone interception because they were on the 21, but like with the return, two very very costly turnovers. The flip side of that is like at some point the Vikings are going to win the turnover battle, and their turnovers are not going to be all 99-yard pick sixes. And like one of these days they're going to win a turnover battle, and they're going to win by like 3 scores or something. So if you take out turnovers, which you obviously absolutely cannot do, but if you take out turnovers, the Vikings are like the sixth best team in the NFL by EPA per play. So I don't know. It's at some point, I keep telling myself it's not sustainable for all these turnovers to happen, especially the fumble recovery luck. But I don't know. The Vikings will find something else to break as soon as they fix this one thing.
So I will say the fumbling to me it feels like, hey, we may just be that bad at holding on to the football, right? Like that's at least feasible to me as something that could live within, Alex Madison's, rate of fumbling or whatever. Hopefully with Cam Akers in there, maybe if Madison keeps fumbling, he'll end up getting benched, right? The interceptions, it's just like not like Kirk to throw a high rate of interceptions generally throughout his career. So to me, that one very much has to regress. Like I can't really see that one staying the way it is throughout the course of the season. But yeah, to your point, like in the red zone, you cannot be a hitch late. Kirk has added a little bit of an extra hitch on a couple of throws this season where I thought he's been late on. There was a throw to Addison last week where it was a deep out where a corner got back into the play. Like, you could argue Kirk could have thrown that a little bit further outside, but as well. But I think the added hitch made him later than he needed to be. And it's not even a hitch as in a true, like, okay, I'm going through my progressions. I hit the top of my drop back. I add a hitch to that. He's not perfectly lined up, and he resets to be able to throw the ball, and that's what's adding the time on there. So it is a pretty minute footwork thing. Like other quarterbacks do that too, and I can't say I've watched Kirk's footwork historically enough to say if he's always had this or not. But it's definitely been bad with the timing that the Vikings have on offense. So they need to figure out something that works to make that timing accurate. And on the interception, obviously it is very arguably Ed Ingram's fault, right? That Kirk gets hit and it gets popped out. But that doesn't mean, like, one negative play does not mean that an offensive lineman had a bad game, even if it is a catastrophic negative play that turns into an interception or something like that, right? So I think we need to have a little bit of nuance when we're discussing that. It's like, yes, Ed Ingram did something bad, but also, honestly, like, the entire offensive line was quite good in this game. And why don't we flip it over to the run game right now and talk about that a little bit, because I was extremely impressed with the push they were able to get up front on the Broncos. And one thing with the Broncos is they are a Fangio-style defense. Ejiro Evero, who the Vikings very heavily pursued as a defensive coordinator this past offseason, is their coordinator. They were playing with a ton of too high shells in the game, but they still have defensive linemen that should be able to win in the run game, particularly Derek Brown. And the Vikings were just pushing him all over the field. They were pushing every single player in that front seven all over the field. It felt like the wide receivers were getting on blocking. The tight ends, I mean, I'll let you wax poetic about Josh Oliver. I thought TJ Hawkinson had a very good game run blocking as well. Just everybody in general was clicking, and the running backs were making great reads. So why don't you jump into it, Nick?
Yeah, it was basically the most encouraging rushing game I could have. If you had, I couldn't have like schemed it up any better for it to be more encouraging what they were able to do against the Panthers. And granted, the Panthers aren't the best front seven that we'll face all year or anything. I do think they're well coached. I do think they have a couple really good players up front. But I think the thing that was most encouraging about it was that they were generating vertical displacement, which is absolutely not something you associate with the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, the Vikings for forever have been a wide zone team full of skinny, undersized super athletes who are not going to win drive blocks, but they can reach block and they can do really great things on outside zone. So they're going to run the most outside zone of anybody in the NFL. And last year, they ran the second most zone runs in the NFL. Ran very, very few gap scheme runs. This was the first game under Kevin O'Connell where they ran more gap scheme runs than zone runs. I mean, they're still mixing in a lot of their mid zone stuff, but I think their primary run in this game was duo, which is that's kind of weird to see. It's like especially out of a Kevin O'Connell offense, but they're mixing in a lot of duo and a lot of power, and some counter as well, also a gap scheme run. And the end result was they were just winning constantly. I mean, the Madison and Akers combined for 6.1 yards per carry that from their backs. So that's fantastic production. It was the best rushing EPA per rush of any team in the NFL last week was against the Panthers with Madison and Akers. And I think the most encouraging thing was like again, like these guys were not busting off like that 6.1 yards per carry is not inflated by like an 80-yard rush in there or something. That was just they were just constantly hitting, like singles and doubles over and over and over again. I mean, I guess with the Twins, I'm in a baseball analogy mode, but like it was really really effective stuff to see. And it was like clicking on all levels. Like obviously, the front five up front were doing really well. I thought Ezra Cleveland had a really impressive game up front, climbing to the second level. Darrisaw had a good game. Schlottman even like I've been like bench Schlottman because of how bad his run game was, but I thought this was probably his best game yet as a pro, and I think he did really well. Ingram was really good. I mean, Ingram generates a lot of push. I mean, other than Darrisaw, Ingram is probably your go-to guy for who you want like in short yard situations because of the power that he has. And when he pulls on power, he hammers dudes. That was really good. And obviously O'Neal's always good. And then you get the standout of the game was obviously Josh Oliver, who was just the things he was doing were incredible. I mean, he's matching up against defensive ends and burying them in the dirt. Like that's pretty. I mean, it's hard for an offensive tackle one-on-one to do that, but for a tight end to do that is insane. He was generating a lot of holes. I mean, guys were being driven off the line of scrimmage, yards back, climbing to the second level, comboing very well, just generating consistent holes. And then to top it off, I think Madison did a very good job being very fast, but also reading his blocks well. And I think Akers had a very impressive debut. Akers showed a lot of power after contact on both in the run and in the pass game. He had a lot of vision to sort of. There was like a power run where like the pole didn't get home, but he was able to save it with his vision and sort of set up his blocks. And there were a couple zone runs where he was able to sort of get the second level defenders to lean one way and then hit the other hole and stuff, which is what you want to see. So all of it kind of combined together. I mean, there were a lot of like the success rate on the ground was very, very encouraging. So that's obviously it's not going to happen every week. And Evero was running a lot of too high safety stuff where you're going to be running into some more favorable run looks. But at the same time, everything was clicking up front. The backs were reading it well and were hitting the hole hard and fast. And basically everything was just like going forward. It's really nice and it's really encouraging to know that this is still a mid-zone team, but if you want to give them favorable looks, they'll check into duo and they can kick some ass. And that's the first time we've been able to say that about a Vikings run team in a very, very long time. So really encouraging stuff from the run game up front.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good stuff from the run game. And one of the things you pointed out very early is the vertical displacement that they were getting. Like, there were some plays where I think it was Derek Brown was trying to get upfield against Schlottman, and he got upfield, but Schlottman did a very good job of positionally blocking in those scenarios, right? A lot of times you let the guy run by you and make sure that you are on the correct side of the play, right? So the running back's to your right, you're completely between your guy and that running back. But with that guy a couple yards into the backfield, Ingram and O'Neal had driven like the double team like 3 or 4 yards back. So really, if you have it from the side view, there's like 5 yards of space for the running back to work with that gets created just from the dichotomy of that action, right? So it was just a really impressive run game overall. And the Vikings, I mean, it shows in the numbers, right? The Vikings have the third best in weeks 3 and 4 combined. The Vikings have the third best success rate of any team rushing in those weeks. They're like 6th, I think, in EPA per play over those 2 games. Weeks 1 and 2, they were dead last, like by a lot in EPA per play, and they were 29th in success rate. So the run game has really come along. I think the blocking is a big part of that. I also think that the defenses they're facing the run game is going to fluctuate a little bit based on the defenses that they face, right? The Bucs were very heavy in the box. They have very strong run defense personnel anchored in the middle by Vita Vea. The Eagles have just an absolutely monstrous defensive line. I don't really know what personnel they were playing with, like how many people they had in the box overall in that game, but they just have monsters across the front, right? So of course we got dominated. But guess who went off in both of those games? The passing game in general, but Justin Jefferson in particular, right? So there's a cost to doing that, and Justin Jefferson was, I'll say, held a little bit more in check, or at least the passing game in general was held more in check in this game, right? But we were still able to we were incredibly effective on the ground when we ran it. So I think that's just kind of the trade-off. We're going to do well what the defense allows us to do well, right? Where the defense isn't dedicating their resources, that's where we're going to attack them. And I love that mindset from this offense. So I mentioned Justin Jefferson over there. Let's turn it over. Obviously, he didn't have another 150-yard game, so he didn't quite keep up that pace on the season, but he is still on pace for 2,000 yards, I believe. And he had 80-plus yards, maybe it was 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, didn't get the yardage he got in the first couple of games, but he tripled his touchdown total, right? He went from 1 touchdown to 3 touchdowns after this game. Could have had a 3rd touchdown if it didn't get called back for holding on Josh Oliver, one of his rare negative blocks of the day, I guess we'll say. What I liked what the Vikings did for Justin in this game is they got him a couple scheme touches early. And then also there was the 4th and 2 where, I think it was C.J. Henderson who was going against was just playing way too often, and they just took it, right? They just took the free stuff to Justin Jefferson. They had a really fun play where they ran, it was 13 personnel, and they used a tight end motion on a wheel route, and they used a T.J. Hawkinson in post route, whatever you want to call it, and Jefferson following that kind of with run action on the play to get Jefferson open. I thought that was a pretty creative way to, with heavy personnel, get Jefferson going because the defense is expecting to run so heavily in that scenario. And then the first touchdown was really a good adjustment by Jefferson, to sit down when he had open with Kirk rolling out. The second touchdown was just a one-on-one win on a free play, right? And that's what you want to see, those deep throws to Jefferson. So I obviously 88 yards isn't great, but Kirk only had 150 something passing yards, so he really got half of Kirk's passing volume in the game if you put it that way. You want to go off on Jefferson, Nick?
Yeah, he also had a really impressive route where he made the quarterback fall over on a deep out. That was one of Kirk's other good throws of the game.
He only does that 3 times a week. So do we even really need to highlight it anymore?
Yeah, totally. And then that second touchdown, obviously, I've harped on Kirk, but those 2 throws I thought were really impressive because that was like a dart, and it was just okay, you're gonna leave Kirk you're gonna leave JJ 1-on-1. I'm just gonna throw it to the outside leverage that he's got, and Jefferson connects, and it's easy. It's an easy touchdown, and then the you're too short
yes.
touchdown celebration, which I'm pretty sure you cannot professionally recover from after that one. So. It was not the most efficient game from the passing offense, but when you're running the ball as effectively as they are, they actually ran the ball a little bit more than they passed. They're also kind of in a weird way, they were kind of in control for a lot of this game too, or at least in the second half. So game script, we've been in game script where they've been very pass heavy. I think game script they were forced into being a little bit more rush. I mean, Kirk only had 19 attempts. That's pretty low, I think, especially for Kevin O'Connell, who likes to be more pass heavy. In game-neutral situations, but despite the extremely costly turnovers, they kept things explosive, which is that's what you want to see. You want to continue to see them moving the ball, having explosive plays, and being able to keep drives going. So the rush success, though, it's weird because the Vikings are below average in rushing, but they have the 4th best rushing success rate in the NFL, percentages of runs that generate positive EPA. It's really the fumbles that are dragging down the rushing EPA. But I think the rush success rate is kind of what you should look forward to more, as is a little bit more predictive. They're also the 2nd best team run blocking grade by Pro Football Focus. So I feel confident in saying, weirdly, this was a very bad running team last year. I think they are. I would predict them to be an above average running game going forward, even though they've struggled a lot. But the emergence of Oliver, Cam Akers having a good game, and then just how dominant they were up front, especially in this game, and that the fact that they're not just a zone team, but they can bulldoze guys in the run game, that all gives me a lot of confidence. And you combine that with Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell designing up these explosives, I don't have a lot of confidence in the defense going forward necessarily, just because of the personnel. But like, they're really talented on offense. I feel like they are going to have a good run offense, and they're going to continue to get explosives in the passing game. That's a good formula for a team going forward, which they will need. If I can segue over, they will absolutely need if they want to go blow for blow with Patrick Mahomes at US Bank Stadium next Sunday. Anybody stand out to you in the Chiefs matchup coming up against the Vikings on Sunday afternoon?
Taylor Swift. No, I mean,
Who's that? Travis Kelce.
obviously you have like two top 10 NFL players, right? Like on any position, you have the number one player in the NFL, right? Patrick Mahomes, obviously the best football player on the planet. Sorry, Justin Jefferson, but it's Patrick Mahomes. JJ might be two, very, very much so. But a top three, let's call it, if you count Tyreek, JJ, and Travis Kelce, like the top three receiving threats in the NFL. That's who Travis Kelce is. Like he's just absolutely dominant from the tight end position. He does wild stuff. He and Patrick Mahomes are literally just playing backyard football out there half the time, and nobody can stop it. Like it's absurd. So those guys, frighten me. I think the Chiefs' offensive line is quite good. It's maybe a step back from what we've seen in the last couple years, but Donovan Smith's playing pretty well. Jawan Taylor is not false starting all the time. Like people need to understand that, or just like we talked about I think we talked about this with Andrew Thomas last year, that moving your back foot prior to a snap is not a false start. I guess he was lining up off sides, and the refs have been very adamant about punishing him for that. So we'll see if that happens in our game as well. But I don't think that's the same level as Orlando Brown, and I think Andrew Wiley was their starting right tackle last year. But that interior offensive line is still intact, and it's still one of the best in the NFL with Tooney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith at right guard. So they're going to be good across the board. Nobody in the receiver group stands out as a number one, but you've got Patrick Mahomes distributing the ball, so you don't need another number one, and Travis Kelce's your number one. Isaiah Pacheco looks impossible to tackle, right? Like, and the Vikings really struggled to tackle last week. Actually, I found that kind of interesting. The Panthers broke 12 tackles against the Vikings, which is more like the Vikings. I think prior to that had like 26 missed tackles. It just felt like the Panthers were getting some extra yardage that they really shouldn't have. And when you have Kadarius Toney and Isaiah Pacheco on the other side of the ball, like you do have to be concerned, and they have to be on their P's and Q's with tackling, the opposing players. So the offense, Andy Reid is the best offensive coach in the NFL. Like maybe Kyle Shanahan's the best offensive coordinator in the NFL, but Andy Reid's two if he's not one, right? Like it's just, it has the potential to be a juggernaut in any game. So obviously it'll be really interesting to see how Flores decides to try to stop it. It's honestly, whatever he does might not work, but if he finds a way to make it work, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think that covers it really well. The one weakness they have is their skill players outside of Mahomes and Kelce are not very impressive. But like, who cares when you've got Mahomes and Kelce? So,
and they've got juice
line
too. Like it's not like their skill players aren't all that impressive, and they're like slow and sluggish like every single one of the Panthers skill players, right? Like the Panthers had no. What? Oh my God, the number of times Adam Thielen mailboxed in that game when like he wasn't gonna be open in like two steps because he wasn't fast enough was wild. Did you see that on tape? By the way, it was ridiculous.
Yeah. So I mean, and the Chiefs. I mean, MVS. He can take the top off defenses. They've got guys. They've got like, it's not necessarily, there's like no complete receiver, but they've each got a guy who can like do one yak, whether it's whether it's at the catch point, whether it's doing interesting things in the screen game, which you got to watch out for Andy Reid's screens because he's the best in the NFL at designing them. They've got a lot of guys that can throw at you, and the defense is currently top 5 in the NFL in EPA per play allowed. So like they are also very good on that side of the ball. I think as good as Patrick Mahomes is, people kind of sleep on how good they are up front. They've got a lot of good guys in the secondary. Chris Jones is obviously the star player there. Was a difference maker. He missed week 1, and that his absence was very much felt. But inside-outside player. We've seen Ingram struggle, so that could be a matchup to watch. But George Karlaftis also coming on as well, young player, good edge rusher as well. Trent McDuffie was a guy that often mocked to the Vikings. I think he's playing very well. Jerry Sneed, also somebody who's another young corner with a lot of athleticism. And they've got safeties as well. So I don't know. I feel like they are no slouch on the defensive side of the ball as well. So I mean, in my opinion, people will probably. To me, they're clearly one of the top two teams in the NFL. I mean, it's hard. I know that they have struggles and they're not undefeated or anything, but any team with Patrick Mahomes to me is going to be very, very hard to bet against. So how good they are, how talented they are on the defensive side of the ball, plus the fact that they have Mahomes, Kelsey, and a very good offensive line, I think this is going to be probably one of the hardest teams to beat on the entire schedule. So.
Yeah, and obviously everybody saw the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football last week, right? Because the whole world was watching for Taylor Swift in particular, but also just to kind of see Zach Wilson get killed, and he didn't end up getting killed. He actually played pretty well, so that might give some optimism coming into this game, right? Like if the Chiefs are in a little bit of a funk, and they have been in a funk on offense. Like they played a close game against the Houston Texans of all teams last year, right? So it's not like they're immune to that, but at the end of the day, to me, the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL until proven otherwise, right? Like, get to the playoffs and somebody beat them in the playoffs. And if you can't do that, then, you don't really have much of a claim to me. So, I obviously I don't expect this to be a win for the Vikings. Well, let me just run over the defense real quick before we talk about, who we expect to win the game or what we expect the game to look like. I agree with you. Chris Jones is an absolute monster, right? He's the type of player everybody on the interior of our offensive line has struggled with, right? He's super powerful. He's, super quick. He just does everything well on the defense. Like, he was a top 3 defensive player in the NFL last year, right, with Watt and Garrett and Bosa. I forget who won Defensive Player of the Year. But basically, he could have very legitimately won Defensive Player of the Year. He's the second best interior defender in the NFL behind Aaron Donald, right? I don't even think there's much debate about that. It was almost a 1A and 1B situation based on how he played last year. And he's playing extremely, extremely well so far this year. Like you said, they have a lot of pieces that aren't huge names elsewhere on the defense, but they've put it together to become a very cohesive unit. And it's a unit that I think has gotten a lot of reps together as well. They've had pieces come in and out, but a lot of it was young. Like last year, their secondary was almost entirely rookies, right? And they came together and they won a Super Bowl with that secondary. And now it's the second year for the exact same players. So it's been a really impressive effort overall for the unit. In terms of expectations, the Vikings are at home, so that does help them, right? The Chiefs do have some questions, but I think ultimately, you want the Vikings to be competitive in this game, but you shouldn't have an expectation that they win the football game, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's the NFL, anything can happen, and the fact that it's at US Bank Stadium helps a lot. I think the line in this game is, -5 or something for the Chiefs, so... Chiefs obviously pretty heavily favored, but not by a full touchdown. So, if the Vikings lost by 5, that wouldn't feel like the worst result in the world to me. And I certainly feel like they're certainly capable. I mean, we just saw Mahomes look a little out of kilter against the Jets of all people, and Zach Wilson of all people put up some points against this Chiefs defense that has otherwise stymied a lot of a lot of other offenses. So.
To be fair, the Jets do have a really, really legit defense, both from a defensive line perspective and from a secondary pass coverage perspective. So that probably helped them quite a bit. I don't think the Vikings are up to that standard. So it'll be interesting. Unless we can get individual pressure on the defensive line or the corners, can man up against the guys that the Chiefs have if we run man coverage, I don't quite expect us to have that performance.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that gives me some encouragement is I feel Chiefs, Spagnuolo's a man-heavy kind of defensive coordinator, and that's what kind of scheme he's running right now. This is an offense that's built to beat man coverage. Justin Jefferson, obviously, even if you bracket him, even if you're giving 2 true brackets to Justin Jefferson, which is, I think, the only way you slow him down in man coverage, and then you're going to have Jordan Addison, who we've already seen is very good. with his route running and with his speed at beating defenses that way. And TJ Hawkinson, I feel like, is just a complete beast on those choice routes, or anywhere else where you scheme them up. And if the defense doesn't have like an ideal tight end eraser, I feel like Hawkinson could be due for a big game. So I feel like this is kind of the game where the passing offense, that sort of pick your poison style of having a lot of really good weapons, not just Jefferson, but a lot of other really good secondary, tertiary weapons could come into play. And the Chiefs, their cornerbacks are good, but they don't have a lot of size necessarily. And so I feel like Hawkinson's a big guy. Justin Jefferson's certainly bigger than Trent McDuffie. So if they shadow Jefferson with McDuffie, who might be their best corner, that's going to be advantage Justin Jefferson. Well, it's always going to be advantage Justin Jefferson. But that particularly is a matchup I will take if that's the way that Spagnuolo chooses to go with it. But I mean, he mixes it up too. He throws in zone coverage. He blitzes too. So they're going to have to have a full. They're going to have their hands full on both sides of the ball. So it will be interesting to see how the Chiefs try to limit Justin Jefferson, the Vikings passing attack, and how Brian Flores approaches trying to slow down Mahomes. Does he blitz him a lot? Do you drop in his own coverage? Do you do man with a spy? It's kind of like, well, I don't think that any of those answers are correct, but you got to do something.
Yeah, I will say Ivan Pace was a fantastic spy at Cincinnati, so maybe that is something that could be unlocked here. One of the things on defense that I just kind of popped into my head is this is a game I wouldn't be surprised if we ran actually more man coverage than we have in the past, and particularly more one double just on Travis Kelce, right? One double is the famous Belichick coverage where it's basically like, we are going to double number, in this case 87, it'll be one double 87. We're going to double this player, our opponent's best player, to take him out of the game. And that bracket could be something like Josh Metellus and Cam Bynum, right? Guys who kind of have that corner safety versatility on both ends and are big enough to match up against Kelce. And at that point, you can lock in a Caleb Evans on somebody like MVS, right, to match up with that size and speed combination. And then Byron Murphy on whoever else is out there, because a lot of the other guys kind of have that quick, maybe more route. None of them are particularly polished route runners, I would say, but maybe more of a route running, like quickness style to the game. So that could be really interesting to me if we run that. Now, as I addressed earlier, we've run way more zone and we've run way more blitzes. I don't think trying to blitz Patrick Mahomes to death is the correct answer, but we'll see how Flores approaches it, right? Like, he's going to be aggressive either way, I think. So I'm definitely interested to see what he comes up with in this game. So anything else before we get out of here, Nick?
That's all I got.
All right. No, great. This is a lot of fun going through this. So let's wrap up the show here. We'll give you where you can find us. I am Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. He is Nick Olson. You can find him at Nick Olson NFL. Our co-host Greg is at You've Been Gregged. Kindred Skulls you can find on Twitter at Kindred Skulls. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We also upload everything to the YouTube channel if you're watching on there. Make sure to give us 5 stars. We just do this for the love of the game, so we just love seeing it. So appreciate all of you guys out there listening to us. Have a good week, and Skol Vikings.
Goal. Goal, baby.
Another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score the old Vikings along. We'll score